Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You know, one of the awesome things about this channel is the conversations that I get to have with you guys, either people shoot me an email or something that happens in the comment section below, or just a discussion that I'll have offline with somebody because of a topic that we talked about. And a question that I got posed to me recently in a couple different formats and in a couple different ways was, Lewis, if you were gonna build a bike, what material would you want the bike built out of? And to make it interesting, it would be better if the question was framed as this being my only bike. What I then did was I broke down the three areas that I could configure in my mind in which I would use a bike. The first being for gravel riding, the second being for high performance riding, and the third being for just kind of like chill, hanging out with your friends, coffee type rides. So then what I did was I created these subcategories, and I'm like, what frame material would I want for each one of those? I know that's kind of cheating because that wasn't the question, or at least the way how I interpreted the question. So I'm going to answer in terms of those three categories, but then I'll answer the real question about, you know, if it was going to be one bike, how would I want it built? So, and I'm also going to take it a step further. I'll tell you some criteria that I would want the bike to have and some characteristics of the frame design that I would require. I think this will be interesting. All right. Okay. The first category in which I would use a bike would be gravel. And I look at gravel as like there's fast gravel rides that you do where you're trying to get it done and hitting those speeds, maybe even riding in a pace line. And the second type of gravel is where it's a little bit longer ride, more chill. It may be mixed terrain, and it's definitely kind of like more, I don't want to say smell the roses, but more adventure oriented. In both of those categories, I would want my gravel bike made out of steel. Now, the performance difference that I have been able to extract out of a well-made carbon gravel bike versus a well-made steel gravel bike is not that much. They both kind of like, to me, perform the same, but they feel different. And they don't so much feel different when you're riding them. They feel different when you're done with the ride. They do feel a little bit different when you're riding them. I'll explain that in a second. But I've ridden the Colnago C68 gravel, and I've also ridden the Basso Palta this past year. In the past, I've ridden a Specialized Crux and also the Trek Domani, which you can use for gravel. And the consistent thing that I can say when you ride a carbon gravel bike is that, you know, we all feel the buzziness transmitted, whether we're on a steel or carbon. At least I do. I may feel a little bit different. But with the carbon gravel bikes, I feel it more when I'm done with the ride. It's kind of like there's an effect that my body just feels a little bit more beat up when I come off of a gravel bike. And that's with running the same 40 millimeter tires on there. Wheels may have been different, but that wouldn't make that much of a difference compared to my Cinelli Nemo Gravel TIG, which runs 40 millimeter tires, but it gives me such a confidence in the way how it just goes through gravel. I feel like I'm just plowing through it like, rah, and it doesn't matter. But the real difference is when I'm off the bike. I do feel buzziness and vibrations. I'm on rough terrain, but I don't feel that kind of like I'm beat up feeling when I get off of the steel gravel frame. So whether it's a fast gravel ride or an adventure type of gravel ride, I would want my gravel bike made out of steel. Performance riding. For me, performance is those fast group rides that I like doing on Saturday mornings where the thing becomes a Peloton. It's not paced. They're trying to drop you. It's kind of like get in where you fit in type of thing. And you need a bike that can accelerate into disappearing gaps before they disappear, that can give you the ability to come out of the corner and get back on the wheel or stay on the wheel, where acceleration is premium. Stiffness to weight ratio is the order of the day. That is 100% carbon, no doubt about it. I can do it on a steel frame. I have done it on a steel frame, but it's a different type of work on a steel frame. I would want a carbon frame to be able to handle that kind of stuff better according to my current level of fitness. Now, the other type of performance would be like climbing, like sustained climbs, like where you're climbing for 45 minutes to an hour, average 6 to 7% grade. Again, stiffness to weight ratio. I would want a bike made out of carbon for that because weight matters. And then the other type of performance would be like if you're riding on rollers, not anything steep. I think a steel frame would be more enjoyable for that type of riding. I've done it on both materials, and Georgia has a lot of that type of terrain. I've done it on both of my steel frames, and I've done it on most of my carbon frames. And I think that I would prefer the steel frame just because I like steel frames better. And the feel is good and the performance difference is not that big. So let's call that one kind of a toss up. So that's how I would deal with performance. Mostly carbon, but in some instances, steel gets the thumbs up. And I'm not ignoring titanium and aluminum. I'll tell you, in fact, let me tell you now before I forget, before I do the next category. I was really privileged to be able to ride the Black Hard Road Tie extensively last year. And before that, I'd ridden another titanium bike. It was a Linsky. And I feel, even though the Black Hard Road Tie did a better job of not feeling vague, there's still a vagueness that comes through with titanium bikes, that it doesn't have the liveliness that you feel from a steel frame. The vagueness that you get from a titanium frame is very similar to the vagueness that you can get from a carbon frame, almost like a wooden feeling. And that's just my experience. Yours may be different. If you disagree, let your voices be heard in the comment section below. Third category, bike enjoyment, cafe rides, hanging out with friends. Calling up a few friends and saying, hey, you guys want to do a 40? We'll go out for 30, get coffee, ride back home at a chilled pace. If you can't guess it by now, that has to be a steel frame, because the enjoyment that I have with steel as a bike material would really resonate in that instance. So, I mean, I don't think I need to expound on that too much. You guys know me well enough to know that I prefer steel in that kind of cafe ride, chill ride type of situation. Now, if I were to configure a bike to deal with the question that was posed to me originally, it would be steel. Yes, you guessed it. But there's some unique attributes that I would want the bike to have. I would want the bike to have pretty much the geometry that my Colnago V3 RS has, which is very similar to the geometry that my Cinelli Nemo TIG Gravel has. They both have very similar head tube angles, kind of like in the 71.6-ish range. And they both have very similar seat tube angle, kind of like in the 74-ish kind of range. So that would be a criteria that I would like. I would like the bike to have the geometry of the Colnago V3 RS, but I would want the bike to be able to at least take 40mm tires, just like the Cinelli Nemo Gravel TIG. So you're like, well, why don't you just say the Cinelli Nemo Gravel TIG? Well, the Cinelli Nemo Gravel TIG fails me in two areas, and they're important to me. One of them is weight. The raw frame weighs, well, my frame weighs 2,200 grams, which I couldn't figure out why the frame weighed that much, especially since they said the bike is made out of Columbus Spirit tubing. So there's some kind of mystery tubing going on, some part of the bike where it's not 100% Columbus Spirit tubing. It can't be. And I think that I would want my bike built out of Columbus Spirit tubing, but I think that based on how I use the bike, that frame could come in somewhere between 1,600 and 1,800 grams. Let's split the difference and say 1,700 grams would be the weight that I would want that frame build to come out at. The next thing that I would want the bike to have is I would want it to have a 44mm head tube angle, just like I have on my Dark Star. And the reason is, one of them is, you just saw it, vanity. I would want to be able to put a Chris King head. I would want to be able to fit a Chris King headset on there, because I think that just classes up a bike really, really, really nice. And the other reason I want a 44mm head tube angle is because there are some componentry that will allow you to run internal cable routing if you need to, if you want to. The elephant in the room regarding my fantasy dream do-it-all bike would be, Lewis, is this rim brake or disc brake? Man, you mentioned 40mm tires. You sure sound like you're selling out rim brakes. And I'm not selling out rim brakes, but the bike would need to be configured with disc brakes to be able to accommodate the geometry that I described, and to be able to accommodate the wheel volume that I would require to be able to do gravel, those fast group rides and chill rides if it were going to be only one bike. Now, put your pitchforks down. I rode a rim brake bike this morning. I rode a rim brake bike last night. And if I go out tonight, I'll still probably ride a rim brake bike. And there's a bike that I have that I am I have it in a shopping cart that is a steel frame made for rim brakes that can take 28 millimeter tires. And that bike could be on the channel very soon. So I'm still a card carrying member of the Rim Brake Society. Save the rim brakes. So yeah, so that kind of like would be it. I can't think of anything else that I want a press fit bottom bracket. I'm not into the T47 or anything like that, because if the frame is made out of steel and is built the right way, yeah, a PF30 would be another thing that would tick that box for me. So those are my thoughts on how I would use a bike, or how I use a bike, and how I would want my ultimate you only get one bike Lewis Scott configured. All right, I'm curious to know about yours. What would you configure? What material would you at least share with us, the material that you want this bike built out of? Let your voices be heard in the comment section below. All right, guys, that's where we're going to leave it. As always, our aim here is to inform, instruct, inspire. Be blessed.